This is 10 Questions to Cyber Resilience, brought to you by Assurance IT. Released twice per month, every episode brings you one step closer to cyber resilience by hearing how IT leaders are practicing cybersecurity. Resources mentioned in the episode can be found in the show notes. If you're ready to take your cyber resilience to the next level, be sure to subscribe so you can catch every episode.
All right, everyone. Good afternoon. I have a really special guest on here today. I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself, but really honored to have PD on the call today. It's important and special for us here at Assurance IT because we have recently signed a partnership with Lightbeam. This is a technology that we believe in fabulously. We love the tech. We love what it can do for the enterprise. And we're excited to start working together with PD and his team. So PD, I'll let you start before we get into some of the questions. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Luigi, thanks so much for that intro. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello to everyone who is listening and watching this podcast. My name is PD, Prasad. I am one of the co-founders at Lightbeam.ai. We are a firm that's registered both in the US and in Canada. We have been looking at data protection, data discovery, classification, compliance around data for quite some time. We'll talk more about the origins, perhaps, of the company. But as background, all our co-founders and a lot of our team members, they all have deep background into AI and data.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. And yes, again, thanks for taking the time today. PD, a question I have. I often hear about the life cycle of data. In the context of Lightbeam, can you tell me how a customer would leverage Lightbeam to manage the life cycle of data in the organization?
Yeah, indeed. In fact, in 2024 and latter part of 2023, the number one term that I kept hearing at conferences was data minimization, because I think people are realizing that one way of keeping yourself secure is to keep only the data that's necessary to be kept, and keep all the data that's not necessary away from yourself, right? Reduce your risk radius, reduce your risk circle in some sense. For us, the way we look at data is we not only look at when any data, any file, for example, we understand when that file was created, we understand when that file was last accessed, by the way, or last touched, right? What content is there in that file? What sensitive data is present within that file? So what we have been able to do is to help customers understand not only that you got data or files that have not been touched in the last 10 years, but also things like, these files contain company sensitive data, so you probably should not delete them. But the rest actually are all old and it don't contain any information that you need to be keeping. So you're much more confident to actually archive them, delete them, and so on and so forth, right? So data, you'll have to understand it from a lifecycle standpoint, because it gets started, it gets created, then it gets copied. Everyone makes a copy of a file. It gets stored somewhere, sent and shared, and at every place of the way, Lightbeam can help customers understand what data they have, who have they shared that data with, how old is that data, whose data it is that's present, can they delete that data, can they archive that data, is that data required to be stored from a regulatory standpoint, right? I'm just giving you some examples, some questions, but these are all the places where Lightbeam can actually help customers in better managing data lifecycle and hopefully minimizing the data that they need to carry with them.
Those are good self-assessing questions. I like those because oftentimes customers, they come to us and they're overwhelmed, right? And I say, well, sometimes you just need to self-assess, like ask yourself some really basic questions. And if you don't have the answers, that's where you need to, engage and get something or bring in the professionals to help you. I mean, self-assessment is sometimes overlooked. And these are great questions, PD, that I think a lot of organizations can ask themselves. So you obviously touched about it in your intro, but can you tell us, obviously, your co-founder at Lightbeam, what was the inspiration behind the founding of Lightbeam, right? What specific data management challenges did you see and are aiming to address in the enterprise?
Right. It was very interesting, actually. All the co-founders, we all came from a company called Nutanix, and we were all there. We were all handling kind of interesting things, interesting areas of our expertise. One of us have been working in the field of AI for well over 8 years, actually now. And the other one, we have been working on data. Like I myself have been working on data technology for close to 2 decades now. What we saw that there was data that as the company kept growing, much like any other company, data was there everywhere. And there's a little thing called GDPR that became interesting and important in 2019. And we started talking, or rather our legal teams started talking to our engineering teams, asking, hey, do we have a good sense of where our sensitive data, our customer data is, right? And obviously, just like any responsible organization, we were doing everything we could to make sure that data was present at right locations and was guarded. But we also wanted a tool that could help us manage that data. And we looked around in the market, and what we found was an opportunity, frankly, because what we found was that there were a lot of tools, they were doing little things here and there. And it kind of struck us that at Nutanix, we actually converged compute, storage, and virtualization. So 3 different stacks. And our co-founders, we thought, why can't we do that for the data management space? Why are there so many disparate, discrete tools when we can actually have a single stack, a single platform that can actually do data security, do data privacy, and deliver data governance as a single stack? So that was the inspiration. It was pretty much some of our own experience and expertise put together.
That's an interesting story. I like the analogy of how, because I mean, I'm very familiar with Nutanix, and I remember your days at Nutanix. So congratulations on that. That was a huge success. So congratulations on that. And I have no doubt that Lightbeam is not going to be is going to be just as big a success, if not bigger. So kudos to that. So can you explain how the solution actually does it? How does it integrate in your organization? Like companies have like data management solutions, perhaps, whether they're using, traditional Excel files or they're using,
Right.
some database. How does it integrate today with the systems and infrastructure, or is it a new heavy lift, and how does it integrate?
So companies have data and data management solutions a little bit, Excel being one of them, obviously, but data is moving, and many companies have data that's there on-prem, but also is moving to cloud. They're using SaaS solutions. So if we think about it, data governance and data management, if it was a problem before, it has become a much bigger problem now, simply because there are tens, if not hundreds, of SaaS applications that companies are using, and the data is flowing to cloud, some of them on-prem, and so on and so forth. What today we see is companies, even if they had a decent solution for on-prem, they're really lacking any solution whatsoever when it comes to data going to cloud and SaaS applications, actually. And so when the way to get started with Lightbeam is actually very, very simple. We have a very, very light touch. Within a few minutes, you will start connecting to your data repositories, places where you keep your data. This could be SaaS, on-prem, or cloud. And we'll start, first of all, showing you what kind of data do you have where. But because visibility is, everything starts with the visibility. Once you know what data you have where, you can start taking more actions, later. And we help with that. We'll talk about that a little bit later, perhaps.
So that brings up a very good point, because we're noticing that a lot of customers have a big reliance on a lot of SaaS applications, rightfully so. I mean, SaaS applications have emerged as being a very efficient way for a business to run, for an enterprise to run. But I think sometimes we forget about relinquishing a lot of responsibility to these third parties and hoping that they will behave accordingly, right? With GDPR or with the privacy acts that are in place in various countries. So can you just maybe tell us how Lightbeam addresses that situation? Like if I'm and I just using a CRM as an example, or some kind of email system, or a financial system, or HR and so on, if I'm putting this data in there, how would I use Lightbeam to make sure that data is either being collected and managed in a secure way? Is that a good use case?
Yeah, it is. It is. In fact, it's a very, very popular use case, I must say. Primarily for the reasons that you were just outlining. People are using SaaS. It is a very fast way of building and scaling your business. The problem is you have zero visibility into what data might be going into that SaaS application, right? And so what we do is, in a very non-intrusive manner, we're not even part of the data path. We are just on the side. Think of us as we are listening to every piece of data that is getting exchanged in your SaaS platform, or any SaaS solution that you're using, for example. We're just listening. And as we listen, we do 3 things. We help you catalog all the sensitive information that you might be exchanging over SaaS solutions. We help you control, so you can actually put controls in place to say, well, this kind of sensitive data should not go or should not be present in HubSpot, which is a SaaS solution, or Salesforce. And then we help you comply. Comply means all the regulations that we're talking about, whether it is GDPR more internationally or Law 25 within the region of Quebec, or the US privacy laws, right? So really the 3 C's of cataloging, which is all our data visibility, control, which is around controls around what data should be present where, and if unnecessary data is getting exposed at locations where it shouldn't be, then we'll actually go ahead and revoke access to that data or take actions like deleting that data, redacting sensitive content, and finally leading to compliance to regulations.
So that was kind of my one of the questions I had next. So, but yeah, I think you've answered it, but I'm going to just kind of double click on that. So when I speak to customers, they often see this, data management involving a lot of manual effort and complexity because they just don't know, right? So if you can just maybe, again, double click on this, is essentially what we're doing with Lightbeam is we're automating a lot of those tasks, right? And basically streamlining the process, I would imagine.
Yeah, so let me present to you a picture that is more often, unfortunately, present at organizations than I would have hoped, which is to say there are employees whose job is to literally take a document and redact sensitive content within those documents manually using tools like Adobe, right? So imagine your job is you get 100 documents, you could sit, you're given some instructions to say, well, in this document, leave data that belongs to PD Prasad, but if there is data that belongs to anyone else, including Luigi, please redact that, right? That's an extremely manual process, and it's no fun for anyone who is doing that. Lightbeam can and does automate that process. You can just literally point Lightbeam to a data repository, set up a policy that says, hey, in these documents, any data that belongs to customers, redact that. And then you will get that done within a few minutes, right? So that's not only savings in terms of time and effort, but also the people who unfortunately have to do these manual things can actually now use their resources and time to do much better and much more strategic things for organizations.
So that brings up a very interesting point. So, being IT professionals, we often talk to the IT side of the house, right? We're often talking to IT people. I'm presuming, and I given my experiences recently, we're talking to a larger audience within the organization. So maybe do you want to elaborate on which organizations within the enterprise are looking at solutions like this? I mean, an IT professional understands the importance of protecting that data and making sure it's secure and it's not being hacked or sold or used in a malicious way. But how does a business benefit from this? And I'd like to understand maybe some of those actual scenarios or those use cases that you've just described in a specific manner.
Yeah. So the scenario that I was describing about redaction and automating that redaction, by the way, that's a scenario that came from business, not from IT, because these were business people. And guess what happens when things are that manual? It takes time, right? You need to produce a result, and instead of getting that result produced within a day, it will take a month, which is unacceptable for business during these days, essentially. So that's an example, but there are other examples as well, right? So think of it as IT and security, they care about data security. Is sensitive data getting exposed? And if it is getting exposed, that will become a business problem. It will become a company killing event, unfortunately, for some businesses. If you're in the business of handling sensitive data, you don't want your sensitive data to be ever exposed. If you're not in IT and security, if you're in compliance, imagine if I go to a retailer and I ask them a simple question, hey, what data do you have about me? It's a simple question, but it's a question that now, many of us have a right to ask. Law 25 in Quebec gives us that right. California Consumers Privacy Act gives us that right, essentially. So that simple question results in 45 days worth of work for multiple people within an organization, because as soon as that request comes in, it goes to a data privacy or data protection officer. They will create a form. They will send that form to 10 different people within their organization. Everyone gets busy, and the entire process is actually getting automated by Lightbeam, where you can actually respond to requests like that within pretty much a few minutes, maybe at most an hour, because if you want to review the results and so on and so forth. So these are what I'm trying to kind of highlight here is this is not a 10% savings in effort. It's a 95% saving, because what the work that used to take maybe 30 days to 45 days could actually be done now in minutes to hours.
And is it fair to say that it's not necessarily going to be an IT professional having to use the platform? Is that a fair statement, PD?
Yes. IT and security, they benefit from the platform, but most of our users are actually business users. It could be the privacy function, it could be the compliance function, but it could also be directly the data function, the marketing function, for example. Because guess what? As they are doing marketing and sending emailers, they have to manage this thing called consent for people who they are targeting. And if you're in violation of consent, people can come and ask you about that. And so marketing's job becomes a far more easier, because now we can completely automate consent management for organizations who are doing this.
Understood. And so now I have an interesting question, and I might upset a few people here, but I love doing it. I just I like to get the argument going. But so obviously IT will be the first user and validator of a platform like this. Whether when a technology comes into the house or into the enterprise, IT obviously loves to evaluate and make sure that it fits their framework and fits the security. Now, given the fact that a lot of line of business users are going to be using this, do you see any contention, whether it be Lightbeam or other technologies, where the IT folks are pushing back and saying, well, we can't support this because we don't have the time, we don't have the manpower or the expertise? So how do you rebuttal that when the line of business says, hey, listen, we can work this? How do you handle that argument essentially?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a very relevant question as well, actually. Our goal, and we did some of this at our previous organization, but our goal is actually to consumerify, if that's a word. I know it's not a word, but
I like that word, yeah.
The enterprise experience, right? Because you and I, we interface with our mobile phones, iPhones and so on, and we get a very different consumer experience. But when we go and work on enterprise SaaS or B2B software, that software is still very much, from a user experience standpoint, still very much like 10 years old in some sense. What we are doing and what we have done, if our users constantly compliment us on how easy it is to work with our platform, how intuitive it is. So the focus from day one, I'll share a little secret, which we don't talk about often. One of our first hires at Lightbeam was a UX designer. So not an engineer, but a UX designer, because we understand technology. We can figure out the technology, but we are not doing technology for technology's sake. Our goal was to create something that a normal person can actually go in and interface, just like they would interface on an app on a phone, essentially. And so that's how we are, I would say, addressing that concern from IT, is by saying that, look, you don't necessarily, we would love for you to have a purview of all this, what we are doing, what we are connected to, what data is, and if there is something of a security benefit because of Lightbeam, which there is always, because we are actually exposing any gotchas, any incidents that might happen before they happen, essentially, because there's data that's getting exposed. So you'll get benefit from that. But your users, as far as they're concerned, they should be able to log in. They should be able to go and see and do their work and generate the reports that they need generating on their own with very little input from anyone else, actually. So that's just consumerifying the experience for B2B SaaS is something that we've been at it for quite some time now.
That's an interesting point, and I like how you put that. So, because again, from an IT professional standpoint, I mean, you care about the security, you care about the technology and the functionality, and ensuring that whatever you bring into your enterprise is safe and meets your standards. But I think we're seeing more and more where the consumerization of a platform is important, and I think I fully agree with that. I think there's sometimes it's difficult to be at the same table where you have line of business and IT, agreeing on everything. But I think in a case where data is involved, I think it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that you're responsible for the platform and responsibly using the solution for your end customers. I think that's really important. So if you had to talk about the 2 or 3 top use cases. I mean, you've mentioned a couple already, but what's the top 2 or 3 use cases of business today, whether it be related to Law 25 or CPPA in California? What are the biggest use cases that you see as being the most prominent? And like, if a customer had to buy Lightbeam for one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, you were giving me 3 use cases, and then now you've curtailed down to 1.
Well, I mean, you can do 3, but if there's one that sticks out and says, hey, this one here is a no-brainer,
No, I get it. I'm on the same page. I will give you the top one, and then if you allow me, I'll give you the next.
Please, yeah, of course.
It really comes down to the triangle of data privacy, data security, and data governance. The top use case, depending on the region, so particularly in the region of Quebec, what we are seeing is data privacy is the top use case, where companies and customers have to comply with Law 25, and they need infrastructure and tooling in place to comply with that. So in the region of Quebec, data privacy, hands down, is the top use case. If I take a much wider view of, let's say, Canada and US in general, I would say data security, which is to say, hey, Lightbeam, can you help me understand what kind of sensitive data do I have? Where is that sensitive data? Is that getting exposed or shared with everyone? That tends to be the number one use case broadly, but more specifically, maybe in Quebec, maybe in California, where there are more strong privacy laws, is a data privacy use case.
Interesting, and yeah, thank you for that. So that kind of sets the stage here for I guess my next question is, when it comes to the quality and the accuracy of an organization's data, I mean, what kind of mechanism is in place, or how do we handle that, ensuring that the data quality and accuracy within the platform is up to par within the organization?
Yeah, and I'll contrast that with how legacy solutions used to work and what has changed actually, right? So legacy solutions, if you think about it, they were all very much regular expression and rules based, which was okay. You can put a rule in software, and that's pretty much it. And after that, the software unfortunately used to work for about a month, and after that, it will generate just so many false positives. You basically give up on that, right? Because there's no learning in legacy platforms. With AI, with the advent of AI, what has changed for us now is that we can actually leverage AI to learn based on a customer's environment, to say, well, this is what's interesting, this is what's important to you, and then be more dynamic in our approach and our response to any security incident or data that might be getting exposed. So that's, to me, I like to call it, which is, legacy used to be deterministic, which is more rules-based. AI actually enables us to be a lot more, dynamic and probabilistic, which actually helps us be, to the question that you were asking, be a lot more accurate, be a lot more efficient and fast. A simple example of being a lot more efficient and fast actually is, a rules-based engine has no intelligence, or has very little intelligence, versus Lightbeam, it will look at a document, and within a second, it will figure out if this document may contain sensitive data or not. How? Because it might have seen a document like that before, right? And it is able to infer using inferences to say, well, this document is something that I need to look more closely and carefully, and this might have a table, right? So it's already knows about the document before it has even started scanning the document, versus a rules-based engine, which has no other intelligence like this, and is going to go. And that brings actually not only accuracy, but also performance at the same time.
Yeah, being adaptive to the environments around you, I think that's really important in any technology today, right? When we talk to vendors on a day-to-day basis, we always want to make sure that there's an element of learning or AI embedded in it, because if not, I mean, rules-based, I mean, like you said earlier, definition-based or rules-based, I mean, it's dead the day after. I mean, you can't rely on it heavily going forward. So that actually brings up another point. So given the exponential growth of data that we're seeing today, right? I can't ask you for futures, and I know you're not going to tell us too much, but I mean, what do you see? Where do you see the future going in terms of how these, a platform like Lightbeam can address the exponential data growth in the platform? How do you see Lightbeam addressing those challenges inside the enterprise?
Right. I mean, think about it. We consider the world to be, increasingly going to become more and more hybrid. Hybrid meaning there will be data, particularly in enterprises, that will be on-prem, and they're all going into cloud as well, right? They've got all kinds of clouds. So the two secular trends that we see as it pertains to the area of work that we are doing is AI and data, right? Data is growing rapidly, and AI is actually growing and catching up to a lot of things as well in some sense, right? The way we are leveraging AI for bringing data governance actually is by tuning, tweaking AI models so that they can do data governance at scale in an automated fashion. So let me give you an example. It's a lot of big words I use, right? At scale, automated fashion, and AI governance. But let me give you an example. If you are training an AI model today, you're training it on some data. How confident are you that that data that you're training your AI model on is the representative of your customer set? It's a simple question. It's an extremely hard question to answer without leveraging the techniques and tools that AI brings. So that's what Lightbeam is bringing, is we're able to take data at scale, not in bits and bytes, but at scale. We're able to figure out, well, what kind of data do you have in there? Whose data do you have in there? Is that data representative of your customer sample, right? And if it is not, then what's missing? And then help you make that data more representative of your own customer sample. At the end of the day, if you're a business, you're serving someone, you're serving a patient, you're serving an account holder in your bank, you're serving a retailer who is, a person who is doing shopping at your retail location. If you're training and you're automating something, you better be sure that the data that you're training on, it actually represents the customers that you have and not some synthetic, models essentially. That's something that we are doing from Lightbeam standpoint for customers.
Fantastic. I like that. And maybe you just want to tell us a little bit about the platform itself. So is this something that you have to, build on-prem, or is it completely hosted in the cloud? What are the options for customers who are looking to maybe start out?
It's hybrid. That's one of my favorite words. So actually, there are a number of customers who use our SaaS solution. There are a number of customers where Lightbeam is deployed 100% within their cloud environment. So think of it as if they are using AWS or Azure or Google, we deploy Lightbeam within their cloud environment 100%. So no data or metadata ever leaves their network, which is great for them. If you're a bank, this is really good for you, right? And then there are some on-prem deployments as well, where we'll deploy it on top of Nutanix or VMware, right, as the case might be. So we're completely hybrid. For us, it doesn't take us anything extra to give customers these options, because different customers have different requirements and different use cases and options. Some don't want their data and metadata to go out. Some don't want this stack to be in their environment. They're much more comfortable with a SaaS service. And I might add, actually, for customers out of Canada, we also offer the option where Lightbeam can be deployed within the Canadian AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Network. That way, none of your data ever leaves your country.
You've done your homework, PD. You guys you're on the ball. I know a lot of people have asked that question, so that's actually a very, very good fact. And the fact that you offer the different flavors of having it on-prem or in the cloud, I think that's an advantage for a lot of clients, because they sometimes feel that they want something closer to them, whether it be in their own cloud, even within country. Sometimes it actually makes a big difference. And on-prem, we still see a lot of companies who prefer the on-prem. In the cases of on-prem, there's a lot more IT involvement, obviously, to get it installed and up and running, and obviously prepare. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's available in all flavors. Before we get going here, because I know you're a very busy individual, and I've taken enough of your time today. If you had to meet an enterprise for the first time who wasn't familiar with data management in general, what would you have them consider, in terms of getting ready or be aware? Let's say you're talking to a customer for the first time. What would be your, I wouldn't say pitch, because that's not the right word I'm looking for here. Is more just, what would you talk when it comes to time to preparing for the data management journey?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we do and how we do it. What matters is what is the pain point that the customer is looking to solve, either now or in some time. And so my approach is always about asking more questions. Do you understand what sensitive data do you have? If tomorrow an S3 bucket or your Google Drive gets exposed, unfortunately, and believe it or not, it's going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us. Data exposure is going to happen, unfortunately, right? The question is, when that happens, how prepared were you to respond? So the question is, if that happens, would you know what data might have gotten exposed? Do you have a catalog? Do you have an inventory? Do you have necessary controls in place that ensure that highly sensitive data is not just flying around, your organization? It's like, very quickly, the example I give is like going to a house and seeing that all sensitive documents are just flying around here, there, and everywhere. You don't want that. No one wants that. You want your sensitive documents to be present in a safe or in some other folder. And if you as an organization don't have that discipline yet, well, that's the place to start. After that, everything else can be done and automated. But that's what we start with, is we'll first help you give that visibility, right? Again, that 3 C's: catalog. We'll catalog all sensitive data for you, no matter whether it is in cloud or on-prem or in SaaS applications. We'll help you put controls, and then we'll help you comply. And we work with, partners. Assurance is a great partner for us, Assurance IT. So we work with partners because, we are the product people. We bring the technology. But at the end of the day, we all know technology is not the answer to every problem. You have to have technology, the right people, the right partners, because every customer is unique, right? They all have slightly different requirements. And who better than, someone like Assurance IT to actually get that in front of the customer and say, okay, this is how this technology can actually solve your problem. So I'll just pause there.
Fantastic, PD. So PD, I want to thank you for joining us today. It was a great time. I learned a lot, of course. Always insightful when talking to PD at Lightbeam. Are you going to be present at any upcoming events in the summer? Obviously I've seen you guys a lot of shows. So are you going to be at any conferences planned the next couple of weeks or months?
We do. One of the most important ones that I would just call out is the Toronto-based IPP Privacy Symposium. It's happening on June the 10th and June the 11th. 2 days, we'll be there. We are speaking at the event. We are exhibiting as well. We'll be meeting a number of our customers, obviously. I look forward to meeting you and the Assurance team there, right? But yeah, and then there are a number of other events, of course. But most of all, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity. A great conversation. I loved, all the questions. It just really helping customers understand, what data they have, where do they need to keep it from a data lifecycle standpoint that you talked about. Those are the right questions, and as long as the customers are asking the right questions, we'll figure out a way to solve those questions for them.
We definitely will, PD. I want to wish everyone a wonderful day, and thanks again for joining us.